Today, the man accused of murdering two young girls in a small Indiana town in a case that made national headlines is back in court as his lawyers push to have key evidence thrown out. Richard Allen is charged with killing teenage best friends Abby Williams and Libby German back in 2017. Those two girls murdered while out walking in a remote area during a day off from school. The case went unsolved for years before Allen was arrested last October. And let's bring in NewsNation national security analyst and former CIA officer Tracy Walder. She's also a former FBI special agent. Tracy, always good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Marky.
Yeah, you and I were talking briefly about this case just last night. Court is reconvening on this in just a few hours. This was supposed to be a bail hearing, but now we know Richard Allen's legal team wants ballistic evidence disqualified. Do you have any idea what that evidence might be?
Look, I can only hypothesize really at this point because it's obviously a sealed motion. But what I'm thinking is that the key ballistic evidence here, at least from what I can see in the probable cause affidavit, is that unspent shell casing that was found next to German's body that matches one of the guns that Allen had at his home.
And also, so many of the gruesome details have been kept under wraps from the public, but perhaps the best known piece of evidence, that recording from Libby's phone of a man telling the girls down the hill, and that command launching that entire podcast on the story. How will that be used in the case? And is his legal team also asking for that to be thrown out, do you think?
So in my opinion, my best guess is the legal team is really focusing on that ballistic evidence because that is what really is going to, quite frankly, put him at the scene of the crime. Yes, we have that very chilling audio recording, but we can't necessarily completely match it up to him. Whereas with a gun and with that ballistic and forensic evidence, we really can. And he has said multiple times, and that was in the probable cause affidavit, that he never let that gun out of his possession. He never let someone borrow it, and he had never lost it. And so I think that's probably mostly where the defense is going to focus today in terms of evidence suppression.
Okay. And just, in your crystal ball, how does this shake out? I mean, will the case be affected if a judge agrees to throw out that ballistic evidence? What does that mean for prosecution?
So in my opinion, just with what I can see in the probable cause affidavit, and again, there is evidence that is obviously not in that affidavit that we haven't seen, I do think that if this evidence is not allowed to come into play, and if the judge suppresses it, the prosecution could be in some trouble here. Now, certainly we have convicted with multiple circumstantial pieces in many, many cases. That is absolutely not unheard of. But in my opinion, this piece of ballistic evidence is very, very critical in really tying him to the scene of the crime. And so I do think it will be problematic for the prosecution if the judge does not rule in their favor.
And Tracy, I also wanted to ask you, I'm so curious about the time here. Richard Allen was arrested more than 5 years after Abby and Libby were killed. Will that 5-year gap help the defense or the prosecution more when that case finally goes to trial?
You know what, Marky, that is an excellent, excellent question. I do think it can possibly be used in the defense's favor here, and that clearly it was difficult for them to come to some kind of conclusion as to who ultimately the person is accused of committing this crime. But I think it was a lot of it, I think, related to the fact that they were trying to find the gun in this case, which housed that unspent shell casing. And I think it took them quite some time to do that. And so I do suspect that the defense will be able to use this in their favor. Excellent question.
Okay. It's such a chilling case. Court meets at 10 o'clock this morning. All eyes will be on that. Tracy Walder, always appreciate your time and always good to see you. Thanks.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.